This morning, lawmakers returning to Austin for a third special session, this time deciding how much your vote counts when carving up Texas political power for the next 10 years. In just a moment, Democratic Senator Royce West is with us on where he expects the GOP to really target. And we'll ask Republican Representative James White how many seats conservatives might pick up. There's another Republican now running against Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. We'll look at what Fort Worth Representative Matt Krause might bring to this race. And it once had the worst COVID infection rate in the state. El Paso now with the best and the most vaccinations across Texas. El Paso's Mayor Oscar Leeser joins us in just a moment.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning to our viewers across the state. Let's begin this morning with the top political headlines here in Texas. Running for re-election, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is coming to Texas for money. DeSantis is coming to Dallas tomorrow for a fundraiser. Guests are asked to contribute $2,500 per person. The Dallas Morning News first reported about this shindig, and it's happening at the home of billionaire Kenny Trout, who made his money in telecommunications. In a couple of weeks, we could know whether the state's new anti-abortion law survives legally. The law, as you probably know, outlaws abortions in Texas after 6 weeks of pregnancy. Remember, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to intervene on it a couple of weeks ago, but justices did not rule on the substance of this new law. A hearing for the latest challenge is October 1st. And Governor Abbott just signed a bill into law to give retired teachers an extra retirement check. This is a one-time supplemental payment, and teachers had to retire before December 31st of 2020 to be eligible for it. More than 426,000 people will get this extra payment. Retired teachers have long complained that benefits have not kept up with the cost of living. Let's start, though, with what's happening tomorrow in Austin. It begins the rare exercise of redistricting. Every 10 years, state lawmakers redraw voting districts for state lawmakers, members of Congress, and the State Board of Education. Redistricting, as you know, often results in gerrymandering, and that directly affects your influence at the ballot box, how much your vote actually counts. On the program this morning, a Republican and Democrat. First up, the Democrat, State Senator Royce West, representing Dallas, who also sits on the Senate's Special Committee on Redistricting. Senator, welcome back to the program. You're one of the few in the Senate who has gone through the redistricting process a few times, not to date you at all here, but do you expect that Democrats are going to make any gains at all?
The gains, we should make gains based on our population increase. When you begin to look at the population increase of some 4 million people, most of those have been ethnic minorities here in the state of Texas. And from that vantage point, we should be seeing more and more districts where you have African Americans, Latinos, and other ethnic groups being either in the dominant force in the district or being a significant force in an opportunity district. However, the fact is that Republicans control the House, control the legislative branch of government, and they will, if they don't get too greedy, they will not have to worry about too much litigation. Let me take that back. There will be litigation. And from that standpoint, Republicans will do what they want to do because we don't have the votes in order to stop it.
Too greedy, you said, on the GOP side. What do you expect this to look like when it's all said and done?
Well, when you begin to think about it, in terms of the Senate seats, let's talk Senate seats and congressional seats. There's always going back and forth in terms of the Senate seats. I know that there's rumors that Republicans are going to try to get another state Senate seat. And so the question becomes, where will that be? It would appear as though that they would try to make headway down in South Texas, given the 2020 election results. In terms of the congressional seats, both of those should be Democratic congressional seats, given the increase in the population. But the Republicans are not going to just kind of lay down and allow Democrats to have those 2 congressional seats without a fight in the courts.
Do you expect that the primary battleground here might be the Rio Grande Valley, where Republicans started doing better during the last presidential election?
I think it will be. I mean, it will be in those areas where they saw the counties in South Texas, frankly, with an uptick in votes for Trump.
And you talked about legal action. You said there would be legal action. There's already Senators Roland Gutierrez has already filed a suit, and Senator Eckhart has also. What do you expect the fight to be over? Just how the maps are drawn, the districts?
Well, first of all, it needs to be over whether or not we can properly do state redistricting. That's what the lawsuit was that was filed, Senator Eckhart and Gutierrez. Because specifically in the Constitution, the state Constitution, it says what? You're supposed to do redistricting the regular session after you get the census, okay? That would be 2023. The court has been strict constructionist of the Constitution. Let me remind you, when the governor decided to veto the state's, the Senate appropriation, the legislative appropriation, they were strict constructionists. So it's gonna be interesting to see whether or not they do that this time. And then, assuming that they are not strict constructionists, then you're gonna end up having us go to federal court if we believe that Republicans are not acting in good faith.
All right, Senator, we'll see how it unfolds. Thank you for the time.
Okay, Jason, take care.
Let's explore this topic a little more. The third special session, it officially gavels into session tomorrow. The governor is asking lawmakers to consider several things, but the most important is to decide how much your vote counts when carving up Texas political power for the next decade. Ross Ramsey has watched a few of these during his time covering Texas politics. Ross, of course, the co-founder and executive editor of the Texas Tribune. Ross, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jason. How are you?
Doing well here. You know, this third session begins tomorrow. Are Republicans just going to run over Democrats here, or do Democrats have any chance of getting something out of this?
I think the former. I think the Republicans have the upper hand here. Really, the question in my mind is whether they try to draw the most districts they can draw, which would mean kind of slicing things pretty thin to get the biggest number they could get, or whether they try to draw districts that maybe are less in number, but that will hold a Republican majority through the next decade. The second path is probably the most defensible, but the first one's always tempting.
Indeed so. Well, you know, we've watched for years as the courts have tried to figure out the state's failures when it comes to the foster care system. A federal judge really seemed to have enough the other day. You guys wrote about it in the Trib.
Judge Janice Jack has been on this case for a long time. In fact, I think her first ruling was in 2015. She basically says that the state is not taking proper care of foster children. They're in dangerous conditions sometimes. The state's unconstitutionally not protecting their health. Now she's back and she's saying that the lawyers for those kids and for the state need to sit down. She wants a remedy and a plan with the governor's endorsement on it and some attention to this problem.
We'll see if it finally happens. Ross, thank you. Back to you in a moment. Coming up, a Republican on redistricting, State Rep James White on how many seats conservatives might pick up. And El Paso once had the worst COVID infection rate in the state. Now it has the best and most vaccinations across Texas as well. El Paso's Mayor Oscar Leeser is with us in a moment. And if you're looking for your political fix during the week, we have a political podcast. It's called Y'all-itics. Brand new conversations with guests on some of the hottest topics in Texas. Look for Y'all-itics wherever you get your podcasts. Let's pick back up with the special legislative session that begins tomorrow. Democratic areas in Texas had the most population gains in the last census, but Republicans control the process of redistricting because they have majorities in the legislature. And the GOP could carve out districts to submit their leads for the next decade. Our next guest is State Rep James White, a Republican from East Texas, who also has a seat on the House Redistricting Committee. Representative White, welcome back to the program. Let's start with redistricting, obviously the big deal that everyone's talking about, but that begins officially on Monday. Democratic areas have the most growth. Republicans, though, still control the actual process. Do you see Republicans picking up any new seats in the state house or in Congress?
The ultimate answer to your question is November 2022. It's what the people will choose, not necessarily what people on committees or on the House floor. The people will choose ultimately who continues to serve them in the Texas legislature.
At the end of the day, though, there will be 2 new congressional seats carved out in Texas because the state has grown so much over the last decade. Which parts of the state do you expect will get representation, additional representation in Congress from these?
My thought is, there are congressional seats that will have to shed population because their areas have grown. That's Republican and Democrat controlled congressional seats. And there are Democratic congressional seats that obviously need population, or areas that need population. So I would say somewhere in between there, we'll find out where those seats should be apportioned.
Representative White, you're being awful coy with us, though. Is the Houston area, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, where do you think, or the Valley, or even out in West Texas, where do you think these are going to go, though?
Well, again, this is a collective process, right? It's not that I'm being coy. It's a collective process. Look, ultimately, there are just some parts of the state that are definably Republican. There are other parts of the state that are definably Democratic. But ultimately, it's going to be about great candidates, attractive candidates, competitive elections, okay, that bring voters out to make the decisions.
Do you really think that redistricting can be settled in one legislative session over 30 days?
This is my second redistricting cycle. My first session was in 2011. We started the session with 101 Republicans, a so-called supermajority. We had the draw maps, and it resulted in Republicans losing maybe, if you say redistricting was the cause, it could have just been bad candidates, right? Everybody wants to blame it on redistricting, but it just could be you're just a bad candidate. You just didn't win, all right? But putting that aside, I think we dropped 7, 8, 9 seats in 2012. And then we had this situation in 2018, a map that, you would say were controlled by Republicans who drew it back in 2011 with some alterations in 2012 and 2014. The Democrats picked up a number of seats in the House and the Senate.
The governor has several other legislative items on the call for this third special legislative session. What are the chances, though, that lawmakers will actually have time to address anything besides redistricting?
I think it's highly probable. What I found out here in Austin since 2011, we can really do what we want to do if we want to do it. And obviously, if there are repercussions, a level of accountability to pay or to take back home. So I'm looking forward to addressing all of these issues. I'm hoping that the governor puts something on the call dealing with this troubled Child Protective Services system. We had a very tortured court hearing yesterday, and we need to get after that. So I hope that's on the call as well.
Representative White, we appreciate the time. I know we'll talk to you before your session is up, or your term is up too. So thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, sir. God bless you.
Let's go to El Paso now. Have you seen what is happening out west? Earlier this year, El Paso had the worst COVID infection rate in all of Texas. Not anymore. And when the rest of the state saw surges just a few months ago, El Paso did not. What are they doing differently out there? We got El Paso's Mayor Oscar Leeser on the line with us the other day. Mayor, thanks for being here on our program. COVID is not ravaging El Paso like it is the rest of the state. Is there any one thing specifically that El Paso is doing?
Well, Jason, if you remember 10 months ago, El Paso was the worst city in the nation. And, it was really important that we started working together, all the elected officials, all the private sectors, our Office of Management, our city manager, his staff, and the county. And we started working together to talk with one voice, and that was really important. So, when you go from the worst in the nation to one of the best, if not the best in the nation, it didn't happen by accident. It happens by a lot of work, hard work by a lot of people. And I always tell people that if I could move the wall from behind me, you'd see a lot of people that really had a lot to do with it, whether it was the county judge, the UMC, which is University Medical Center, and all their staff, and all the private providers that we work together have one united voice and really give the confidence of our community that we're working together. And that made a huge, huge difference. I'm curious about what happened 10 months ago, because El Paso did have that horrible infection rate. Is there natural immunity that's now playing a role in this, do you think, that El Pasoans have? Well, no, really, what's really happening today is El Paso's 74.7% fully vaccinated, and that's age 12 and up. Now, one of our biggest focuses was the 65 and over. And we can tell you that today, 97.2% have the first vaccine 65 and over, and 88.9% of our citizens that are 65 and over are fully vaccinated. Again, what we're talking about didn't happen by accident. We created a dashboard that gave people the information. We had pop-up sites where we had vaccination sites, we had mega sites. There's so many things that were happening. Like I said, if I could move that wall behind me, you'd see thousands of people working together to make sure that our community was well protected.
And I know it's personal for you, Mayor, obviously losing your mother and your brother last year to the virus. El Paso, though, has lagged the rest of the state, we have seen, when it comes to these surges. Are health officials telling you guys to watch out at all later this year?
You know, we'll always be prepared. And you're right. We look at what's going on around the state. We look around what's going around the country. But, we're being proactive. And one of the things that, if you remember, back in March, the governor said you didn't have to wear a mask any longer. We went on the air, the county judge and I, and we talked together about that the right thing to do was wear your mask, sanitize, social distance. And you know what? The community came together. So again, it was not just the elected officials and the hospitals and private, but also the citizens of El Paso really were a big part of what happened. And, businesses didn't go to 100% when the governor said, go ahead and open to 100%. They knew that from 50, they could go to 60 and see how it worked and gradually go up to 100%. So we've really had great community input because of the unity that our community has been able to have.
Mayor, we appreciate the time. Congratulations to you on your successes there.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for the time.
Another Republican is now challenging Attorney General Ken Paxton. So what does State Rep Matt Krause bring to that race? And does this guarantee Paxton goes to a runoff? We'll get answers on that next on the Roundtable.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley.
Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Ross Ramsey is back with us from the Texas Tribune in Austin. Here's Bud Kennedy from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and Bernadine Steptoe, political producer at WFAA in Dallas, joins us each week. Ross, let's start with you. And Matt Krause, state rep from Fort Worth, he is joining the Republican race for Attorney General. What is he bringing to the race? And he already has some pretty big people to go up against with Ava Guzman and George P. Bush.
He's from the same end of the conservative pool that Ken Paxton is from, and he doesn't have an indictment pending, and he doesn't have a scandal pending. And so, it would give people from that end of the party, Paxton supporters, somebody else to go with who didn't have the bruises and scars on him.
And Bud, does this just guarantee a runoff in this race?
Well, I'm not sure that all four of these candidates will actually file. I think one of these four will probably switch to a different race by the time the filing moves around. But Matt Krause, he's from Fort Worth, but not that well known here. He represents a little bit of Fort Worth and Arlington. The question is how well he can build a statewide audience and raise money. He's obviously very well known in Austin and, wants to be the evangelical standard bearer in case Ken Paxton falters.
Who's not going to stay in the race, you think?
I'm not going to name any names.
Not yet. Bernadine, what are you thinking?
I wouldn't name any names either. But Matt Krause brings a lot to the table. He is to the far right, as it has been mentioned, and he also brings that Freedom Caucus with him. He's on that board. So he is someone who is going to give Paxton a run for his money. All of them might, but definitely Matt Krause.
Bud, let's go back and talk for a moment about the citizen enforcement still under scrutiny for the state's new abortion law. This is not just an issue here in Texas. People are talking about this nationwide, and Republicans aren't too crazy about it anywhere.
In California, it was actually given as one of the reasons that voters kept Gavin Newsom, is because they didn't want to turn California over to the Republicans and have an abortion law like Texas. There's a state rep up in Illinois that wants to pass a bill saying anyone can sue and get $10,000, sue the man who fathered a child. And even in Florida, Governor DeSantis says he's not sure he wants to turn citizen enforcement loose the way Texas has. I think that Senator Hughes and some of the Texans thought that, first of all, since they're saving lives, that this would be something to be immediately copied nationwide. And there's not that much of a will to go along in the rest of the country. I think they want to see, everybody wants to see how the Mississippi case turns out.
And Bernadine, this cannot be the response that Texas Republicans anticipated.
Absolutely not. But Jason, who wants to anger the women's vote, which is a huge voting bloc? And that's what this does, because as I mentioned last week, this is more about a pro-choice issue for some women than just the abortion, because some women who support pro-choice, they don't necessarily support abortion. So why would you anger that voting bloc, especially with allowing citizens to sue you or allowing citizens to get involved who are not involved in this issue, which is very, 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 it's personal.
Yeah, personal and obviously controversial. Ross, we're still a long way from Election Day, the primary, and of course next year's general election. Is this still a factor at all, do you think, next year, either in Texas or nationwide?
I think it depends on what the courts do with it. The Supreme Court didn't rule against the Texas law. They just said they weren't going to stop its enforcement while it's pending in court. I think it's going to be pending in court pretty quickly. There are a lot of other cases running. The DIY law enforcement in this thing stumped the court for a minute, but I think maybe the stumbling block for the law itself.
Good deal. Guys, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you for watching as well. We're back again next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics and hope you can join us then. Until then, have a good week.